when we're looking at training for sport, the graph's going to look like this, in that we can be down so low that we're just going to be horrible. And then at a certain point, if we get any better, it's probably not going to enhance our performance. Instead, we want to operate in this, we operate most of the time in this middle zone. And that's where training, especially specifically through this area, is the most productive for your athlete. As in, this is going to be performance ability in the actual sport, and this is performance ability in the actual component. So what can you guys think of would be probably a good example of this? Oh, we got some more folks trying to get in. What would be a pretty good example of this?
Like the VO2 max, or
yeah,
yeah,
VO2 max. If your VO2 max is, say, if we figured that around here is, say, 30, well, if you go from 0 to 30, your VO2 max is so low, you're going to be horrible at all aerobic sports. But then, for example, not that we had any human beings that can do this, it's outside of very rare occasions, but over this point, it's going to be a VO2 max of like 100. If your VO2 max is over 100, increasing it anymore is probably not going to make you a better long distance runner. You already have an insane ability. Where else are we going to see this in sport?
testing like someone's strength.
Yeah. So I know Tyler is on the cheerleading squad. If you can only, as a male base, meaning you're in charge of putting one girl in the air on your own, if you can only push 50 pounds over your head and hold it there, you are useless. You can't get a girl overhead outside of a toddler. So you're not going to be a good cheerleader. Now, if you got to the point where you can military press 300 something pounds, going from 300 to 305 is probably not going to make you any better of a cheerleader. But it's this mid-range where we get this really big return on our energetic investment. Does that make sense to you guys? So, hence the statement the slide is making here, where once we get beyond basic strength and power and endurance, it's not worth putting in more energy into it. Instead, it's worth just getting better at your sport because you only got so many hours in the day. If you only got so many hours in the day, then, well, it turns out we're going to have to obviously prioritize one thing over another. And we want to make sure that what we're testing has some type of carryover to sport, has some type of importance. Because Lord knows there's coaches that can get hung up on you need to be able to do this, that, and the other, but it has really nothing to do with your ability to play your sport. So, does that make sense to you guys? Now, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Zach. And now more people, but I'm not going to keep saying names because there's more of you and I appreciate that. How strong would you say you need to have an athlete be in, let's say, the back squat to where they're probably strong enough to play baseball? They're strong enough to play basketball, where it's like once we get them stronger than this point, and I'm referring to full range of motion, not like the bro at the rec that barely squats down. But at what point do you think like, okay, this athlete is pretty darn strong. Getting them any stronger is going to require so much time and energy that it's probably not going to give us that much of a return on that investment. You can unmute yourself or you can throw it up in the chat.
Would it be like 200 to 225 and maybe even less depending on their height?
Are you referring to pounds or kilos?
I was doing pounds.
Okay. So if you're a real big, say 250 pound basketball player, if you can squat 200 pounds, you're like we're at this upper end, like you're strong enough that we don't think it's worth getting any stronger.
What was the weight again?
Well, it was the one that you threw out there, bud.
225. If he's 250,
So he can't even squat body weight, but you think he's strong enough to play basketball? Like it's not worth getting him any stronger?
no. He could definitely probably go up.
Awesome. Ian, exactly. Depends on the athlete's weight. So what would you guys think of would be a good benchmark relative to body weight where it's like, okay, if they can squat this percentage of their body weight, they're probably like, they're more than strong enough to play their sport. Now, at this current moment, I do not know of any good research that'll flat out tell you like this is the number, but instead I'm basing this off of my own kind of personal observations. But hence, it's something to kind of think about, think critically about. What would you guys say that is? Only 75% body weight for a male athlete? If somebody squats 1.5 times body weight, so if they weigh as much as I do, they can walk into the gym and squat 315. Okay, they're pretty okay strength. Like you're like, okay, they work out. But where would you say this upper end is going to be? This is where if you see somebody do it, you're like, oh damn, that person's in shape. That person's strong. Woo! 2.5 times to 3 times body weight. Yeah, Zach. If somebody can walk up and squat 2.5 times body weight to 3 times body weight, like that's a strong person. In fact, don't get me wrong, like your greatest power lifters of all times are getting closer to 4 times body weight in some movements. But yeah, you are definitely up and around this area once you get over if you're at 2.5 times body weight, much less 3. So and I apologize for the vanity, guys, but it's just easy. Like, I can squat a little over 500 pounds and I weigh about 210. So, I can squat about 2.5 times body weight. And if you saw that with a basketball player, do you think they're strong enough to play basketball? Yeah, probably even into the realm of overkill. In fact, whoever iPhone is and Braden, no such thing as too strong, Tyler. No such thing as too strong. That's like being too rich, too pretty, and too smart. It might happen, but it's never going to happen to any of us. So I'd say once you got most of your ball sports athletes to the point where they're knocking on the door of a 2 times bodyweight squat, they are more than strong enough to play their sport. Now, what type of athlete would you like to see closer to, now, aside from that power lifter, Olympic lifter, who would you want to see that closer to 2.5 to maybe even 3 times bodyweight squat? And thank you, Cody. Yeah, football. You think of like a running back, you think like a linebacker. You think, I mean, if you saw a lineman that could squat 2.5 times body weight, a 300-pound dude that can squat 750 pounds, like I would be genuinely concerned for the person that has to line up across the ball from them. Because yeah, that's strong. That is a very strong human. So the key is, like with anything with our sport, you need to figure out where's this threshold. At what point are we strong enough, fast enough, have good enough conditioning that doing more and more work isn't going to make us any better of an athlete? In fact, how many of you guys maybe played a sport growing up that your coaches trained you more like, say, a cross-country athlete than a basketball player or a soccer player, and your team's performance suffered for it? Wow, nobody. Everybody had perfect coaching that made them the greatest level athlete they could ever be in their life. They never got injured, never had anything go wrong. And I would have thought that that did not occur in Kentucky. Obviously, I didn't realize that the greatest youth sports development came out of this state. You really think there'd be more professional athletes from Kentucky if they had that great of development? Come on, guys. Anybody got anything? Yeah, you can get those coaches that focus too much on conditioning and not enough on lifting, and the opposite can be true. Good. Any questions with essentially the end of chapter 10? We didn't focus enough on technique. That's nearly everywhere. Any questions there before we move on to chapter 11? Oh, awesome. Give me one moment. Have I ever talked to you guys much about the joys of aging and specifically how different systems of your body tend to degrade at different rates? We discussed that yet in this class? Well, Tyler, unfortunately, not everybody has knowing a lot about strength conditioning is relatively difficult. And you unfortunately find, coaches really understand, conditioning, or they really understand lifting, but it's hard to do both. So, yeah, I will refrain from any other comments since I know your coaches. Yeah, testosterone declines. But what's really interesting is the first real sense, like faculty you have that declines, is your vision. It goes down typically in your 20s and your late 20s. So do you guys know why that is? Why your vision goes down in your 20s?
Stare at a screen too much.
No, this is actually before the advent of screens. This is just kind of a natural effect of aging. Your vision starts going down the most in your late 20s and then continues to go down, obviously, a little bit as you get older and older. That's a good guess there, Zach. The reason your vision goes down, guys, is it becomes much easier to find a significant other. I thought that was a good joke. Now, the last thing while we're talking about the difference between men and women, this is Tatiana. I can't remember her last name. She's was the previous world record in the clean and jerk. This is actually that record. She's with women in super heavyweight Olympic lifting. Super heavyweight starts at a body weight of over 165 pounds, which you guys have been to Walmart. It is very easy to find humans at over 165. Well, she, I think, is like 6 foot. And I mean, I don't know how much she actually weighs. Maybe it'll be up on the board behind. But what's more important here is the load that she's doing, because it's kind of unprecedented. Okay, so, she's 104 kilos, which means she weighs about 200 and almost 30 pounds. And that's 190 kilograms on that barbell, which literally means, guys, that is 418 pounds. And she just jumped that sucker overhead like it was a toy. Now, no offense to most of the people watching here, most of the guys in here can't even deadlift 400 and 30 odd pounds, much less front squat it, much less jump that weight overhead. And of all of the things that she just did, I know I could deadlift that, not even sure if I can front squat it, and I know that I am not able to jerk that weight over. So yes, gender does play a role in abilities when it comes to strength, but like anything else, you can get to be incredibly high levels of strength irregardless of gender. The key is time spent training and focused efforts. Yeah, she's just, it's ridiculous. Next time you guys think you're strong, just look up videos of Russian and Chinese lifters, and it humbles all of us. Now we're going to talk about the adaptations thanks to more of our metabolic style training. So both the aerobic and the anaerobic. Now, obviously, there's going to be a little bit of crossover between the two, but there's always going to be that major principle, specificity, coming up over and over again, not just in the style of training we're doing, but literally in the mode of training. So, like anything else, when you do aerobic style training for long enough periods of time, you're going to enhance your VO2 max. And we're talking about cardiorespiratory endurance. This is going to be long duration exercise. This can be biking, this can be running, this can be swimming, this can be hiking, this can be canoeing, this can be anything as long as we're doing consistent work without really doing any rest. Now we're going to have improvements, not just in how much blood the heart's going to pump, so that cardiac output component, but remember, we're going to improve our actual exchange of nutrients. We're going to improve our muscles' mitochondrial density and the capillary density around them. Our respiratory system might improve a little bit depending on how good or bad of shape we happen to be in before we started. And aside from increasing your VO2 max, another really good indicator of aerobic fitness is now you're going to have a lower heart rate when you're doing the same exercise intensity before. Some of you guys maybe noticed this when you were playing a sport growing up, when you would kind of get in shape and like initially the warm up for your workout or for the training that day would kind of get into you a little bit. But then after you got in shape, the warm up was really easy and something you could just kind of coast through. And that's a good sign that you are now in better aerobic fitness than you would have been beforehand. Oh, now, every piece of the system effectively has a certain amount of adaptability. The heart size, specifically the left ventricle, is going to be able to increase. We're going to then, in turn, pump more blood per beat because we're going to have a better ejection fraction and a greater amount of volume that we can fill the heart with. So, aka stroke volume. Our heart rate isn't really going to change so much as far as our maximal heart rate might go down a little bit because our heart is now bigger, but our resting heart rate is also going to be going down because we're pumping more blood per beat, so it doesn't have to work as hard at rest. Now, cardiac output is going to definitely massively increase thanks to training, and that's mostly due to changes in our stroke volume. So we're also going to have enhanced blood flow to our muscles because not just we're pumping more blood, but we're going to do a better job of vasodilation to that area and increasing the capillarization, so better blood flow to the area. Our blood pressure might go down if we're a little pre-hypertensive or hypertensive. Otherwise, it's going to stay relatively the same. Our blood volume is going to go up. First, it's going to be the plasma volume. And then after that, it's going to be the hematocrit, the amount of red blood cells that we effectively have. So remember, guys, the amount of oxygen that we're transporting. So we talked about the VO2 max. It's literally just the mathematical conclusion of the Fick equation, which is our stroke volume, how much blood per beat, multiplied by our heart rate, beats per minute, multiplied by our AVO2 difference, how much oxygen we're actually extracting from the blood. When we multiply all three of those together, we have the total amount of oxygen we're consuming. Then for VO2 max, the big component is it's relative to your body weight. And so if we have the exact same amount of oxygen we're consuming, but we now have a lighter body, effectively our VO2 max is higher because we're able to use a greater volume of oxygen relative to our body mass. Now, notice, guys, with training, the major changes coming from that stroke volume change and that AVO2 difference, we're going to do a better job of extracting oxygen from the blood to those exercising muscles and shunting more blood to those exercising muscles. Any questions about the changes in the heart size, or is that relatively straightforward? Okay. Now, notice, guys, with the heart adaptations from runners, okay, left ventricular inner diameter, median wall thickness, and left ventricular mass. That's what each of those stand for. Obviously, cyclists seem to have the greatest increase in left ventricular mass. Why do you think that would be over cyclists, or sorry, over runners or lifters? Yes, but are runners also, aren't they also using a lot of aerobic? So why wouldn't theirs be the same as the cyclists? You're on the right track, John. Let's keep working our way through it.
Aren't most cycling competitions like extremely long periods of time compared to runners? Could be, depending on what type of race you do, I guess. But
You're right in that it could be difference in competing, but remember the training is still going to probably involve long distances for both. The key is it actually comes down to more of a biomechanical reason. What's the key difference between running and cycling?
running puts more stress in the body.
Absolutely. Plus, you have the natural bouncing. When you're cycling, you can be a little bit more bent over, so you get a little bit better blood flow return to the heart, along with less stress from the heart because it doesn't have to go vertically and against your own gravitational flux from running. So, in reality, your actual heart adaptations are a little bit better for cycling than it is for long distance running. Mind you, they're both really freaking good. Because notice, even with a weightlifter, someone that does not really do cardio, if when we look over at our axes, that's looking at differences from controls, aka sedentary people. So whether you lift weights, you run, or you cycle, you're going to be improving your heart's function. The key is which of those is going to give you the greatest potential ability for improving it. It's probably going to be cycling. Does that make sense to all of you guys? Good. So stroke volume is going to be increasing from training, both at rest, submaximal, and maximal exercise. And remember, our stroke volume will keep increasing up to a higher percentage of our max. And that's part of the reason why we can have that issue with our projections for your submax extrapolations for your VO2 max. Because notice, guys, when we look all the way down here, after all of these effects, if you have questions about them, we'll go through them. But you're literally looking at individuals that are highly trained. Noticed their stroke volume at rest is literally as high, if not higher, than a sedentary person's is at maximal exercise. They are literally twice as good at pumping blood at rest than some sedentary individuals. That is a huge difference. Any questions about how we get this adaptation, how this changes? Awesome. So resting heart rate is going to go down, and that's a good way to get a basic concept of effectively not just how well trained you are, but also how well recovered you are if you're tracking this for long periods of time. In theory, if you are getting in better and better shape, your resting heart rate should be going down a little bit over the long trends. And then if you happen to be becoming overstressed or you're sick or anything else, your resting heart rate is going to start to come back up. So you're looking to have a resting heart rate that's relatively stable, and then it does come down on occasion because it's showing us a greater amount of parasympathetic tone, which means you're more relaxed, your body recovers better, and we're getting less sympathetic activity of the heart, kind of like we talked about at the end of lab with individuals that are going through heart transplants where they no longer have any vagal tone. So the resting heart rate is usually around 70 beats per minute. And then the hormonal actions of epinephrine stays with you longer. So it's much harder to get that heart rate down when we're talking about being after exercise and relaxed. Now, with that submaximal heart rate, turns out now that you're in better and better condition doing the exact same running test, you can see how the post-training individual's heart rate is consistently lower because since we have a higher stroke volume, we literally don't have to get that heart rate up as high. Now, you're not really going to see a whole lot of change with maximal heart rate. It might go down a little bit, but likelihood is not so much, but it tends to also go down with age. So we're going to find that there's always going to be a bit of an interaction between your heart rate and your stroke volume, in that our body is trying to pump literally as much volume of blood as it needs to. So if we're going to have X amount of blood we need to go and travel to anywhere in the body, we're trying to pump as much blood per beat at the fastest heart rate or the slowest heart rate it needs to be in order to be delivered there. Now, once that stroke volume is maxed out, thanks to the effects of the Frank Starling mechanism, the preload, afterload, and then obviously the actual contraction or contractility of the heart, we're going to pump as much as we need to. Now, when you're also in better shape, your heart rate recovery is going to be even faster, meaning after you get done with hard training, your heart rate is going to drop down more rapidly. So this is going to give us an opportunity when we're talking about programming for groups to put on a heart rate monitor, and the athletes' heart rates who come down faster, make them do the reps more frequently because they are metabolically prepared to go. Now, the key is each individual is going to still have their own rate, so you still can't really throw them together as groups. And your cardiac output at rest is probably going to be the same unless your body change or body size has changed. If you're smaller, you don't need to pump as much blood around your body at rest. If you're bigger, you need to pump more. But it's that maximal cardiac output that is going to definitely increase with time, thanks to having a greater stroke volume. Remember, not really because of changing our heart rate. So now when it actually comes to our capillaries, we're going to literally send more blood for the muscle because we're going to do a better job of vasodilating where we want it and vasoconstricting where we don't. We're going to increase the number of capillaries, meaning those individual smallest part of our vasculature will really get that gas exchange. And that's going to allow us to utilize more aerobic metabolism in that area and remove more of those metabolic wastes. Now, this occurs through what's known as interception and through branching. Interception is effectively where one capillary is going to divide into two. Branching is going to be where a capillary is going along, and then over time, a branch is going to form going off in its own direction, which in turn is going to still deliver more blood. And this is awesome because this is not just occurring in your exercising muscle, but what muscle are you always using no matter what form of cardio you're doing? I guess I should say muscles because there's more than one answer there, but there's one I'm specifically looking for. Exactly, Braden. No matter what type of cardio you're doing, you're always going to be utilizing your heart. So you're going to be increasing the capillarization of your heart itself, increasing the amount of vasculature of your heart, which literally has some positive effects of decreasing your risk of a myocardial infarction because you literally have more ways that you can deliver blood throughout your heart. Now, we're also going to have an increase in our total amount of blood volume. Now, this is going to be occurring from first a shift in plasma because we're increasing the amount of plasma proteins, and otherwise we have a greater blood volume, but it's actually a lower hematocrit. And then with time, we're going to go ahead and have the increased amount of red blood cells through hematopoiesis, which occurs thanks to the wonderful hormone erythropoietin. Now, right here, guys, is going to be the muscle fiber capillary concentration. And you can actually see how the capillary number relative to the muscle fiber size in individuals that are well trained is naturally much higher than individuals that are untrained, which in turn allows for greater delivery of oxygen. Other options there is you're going to be using your diaphragm and your respiratory muscles. So in general, you tend to have a lower blood pressure at all submax intensities. Now, at maximal intensity, you're probably going to have a higher systolic because you're literally able to contract with more force, but a lower diastolic because your body is able to go through greater amounts of total peripheral relaxation, or total peripheral resistance is going to decrease more through vasodilation. So, and we covered that just a moment ago, talking about the joys of the changes in our blood. Now, the good net effect, since we've got a lower amount of hematocrit, we actually have a lower viscosity, which literally means lower resistance to flow. So it's easier to pump that blood around our body. So you can actually see that pre-training total volume of plasma, total volume of red blood cells, and then our overall hematocrit, that's just the percentage that this occupies, and then how our total blood volume is going to go up. And overall, our hematocrit is going to go slightly down, but we do have a greater total number of red blood cells and a much greater volume of blood pumping around us. Now, if you understand this slide right here, guys, you are going to be able to understand this entire chapter. Okay? So, what we're now going to go ahead and have you guys do is we're going to divide you guys up into a grand total of effectively, you guys want to do 4 groups or 5 groups? I don't know if you guys really want to talk about respiratory modifications, because we'll get into that in a few, and it's really not that difficult. But specifically talking about those key changes to our heart, to our blood, and to our capillaries, and also to our muscles from training. So would you guys prefer, sorry, let's move back in. You guys want to do it in 4 groups or 3 groups? All right. Ooh, looks like we're doing 3 groups. I like it. Okay, so we're going to divide into 3 groups. In your group, guys, you are going to, group 1 is going to be talking about the heart. Group 2 is going to be talking about the blood. Group 3 is going to be talking about the capillaries. So the vasculature and how that's going to change due to training. Now, I've obviously already talked through the basics of how these occur. I want you to go further in depth, and then I want you to go ahead and talk about the timeline. So how quickly do these changes actually start to occur? And then I want you guys to go ahead and talk about what are the mechanisms. So for the capillary group, I'm going to give you guys a hint. You should probably look that up. Okay? And you guys are going to come back after about 10 minutes, and I'll send out a message to you guys after about 8 or 9 and see if you guys want a few more. Oh no, looking at time, we're going 10 minutes. And I want you guys to go ahead and talk about, like, okay, how quickly do we get these changes, and what are the major things that are signaling for it? So I know I brought up EPO for blood, but you better explain to us why that EPO is produced in the first place. What's signaling for that? Does that make sense, guys? Questions, comments, concerns? Awesome. All right, guys. Then let's go ahead and randomize, make some friends, learn some things, and I will see you guys back in 10 minutes, and then we'll wrap up for the last 3 minutes of class with what you guys learned. Make sure you write out everything you guys came up with so you can copy and paste it in the chat for everybody. Okay? Have fun. All right, folks, so this is the basic information that all the groups came up with. I did a bad job of hitting record earlier, so I get to talk over it before. Just add a little bit more onto the work that group 3 did, which was good work, in that we're going to see these adaptations to occur in months, if not years. So this is a very long-term adaptation of changing capillary density through sprouting interception, through signaling pathways that are mediated by VEGF, and then the RORAC pathways, along with our heart is going to increase in size and thickness thanks to literally the amount of force that it's having to encounter during exercise. And that's going to be a little bit through like mTOR signaling, which you see in typical, both increasing cross-sectional area and then the length. Along with, we're going to go ahead and see some of those changes with our blood cell volume, and the EPO is going to be signaled because of the kidneys are not getting as much oxygen as they normally would. So they're producing that as a way to make sure that your oxygen levels are going to be more standardized. And this is going to be the reason why both being at elevation and doing a lot of aerobic style training is going to make things more aerobically taxing. So have a great day, guys. Thanks for listening. And the spirometry lab is this week. You can see the video on YouTube of how to go ahead and do it. Make sure when you're breathing into that tube, you exhale only. Then after you exhale, you pull the tube out, you let the air out, make sure that you're not getting in that backwash because everyone else is breathing into it. And I want you guys to be safe. So take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, and I will talk with you guys more soon. Bye-bye.